For more discussion on this historical development, we're joined by a legal practitioner, Towo Oseruwo. He joins us from the United Kingdom. Well, Towo, many thanks for joining us. And let me just start by, very historical appointment for Justice Kekere Eku's appointment, which is historic, by the way. Nigeria's second female Chief Justice, and shaping her leadership and influence in the judiciary reform efforts. What is your take on her appointment and her appointment, and what do you think her contribution will be for the judiciary reforms that we want to see for the country?
Well, on my take is a fulfillment of the provision of the Constitution, which there need not to be a vacuum in any gap at all in the Supreme Court, which is the apex court in our land. Like people would normally say that whatever the decision of the Supreme Court is one of the decisions that you cannot only accept, but you must also agree with it. Well, a way forward, if you look at it somehow, you could see that I can recall that some of his decisions, some of the panels she led, they are really sliding decisions, and she's bold and courageous when she's making or expressing the legal wisdom which she's known for. And I believe that some of the reform, like if you look at what the president the immediate past CGN said during his dinner, you discover that most of the reform they crave for is not issue of policy but issue of law. Except the Constitution is amended, there cannot be proper reform that can be expected of my lord. And secondly, I will also say that apart from those critical areas my lord points out, the only area we should be looking at my lord's intervention is the issue of the alleged corruption or misconduct of judicial officers, which by virtue of his position as the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, he heads the National Judicial Council, and this council is responsible for discipline of early judges. So we expect to hear more of them looking at the excesses of judicial officers in all cadres of in all the hierarchy of the courts.
One of the conversations that's been had about reforms when it comes to the judicial system or our judicial process entirely is the modernization of court procedures and rules that are crucial for the Nigerian judiciary. What actions should, Justice Kekere Eku prioritize to ensure that these reforms are successfully implemented?
Okay, the first thing he needs to do is, first of all, see how he can identify stakeholders. Like I said, most of the reform they are talking about are not reform within the confines of the judiciary. These reforms within the law, the Constitution. Yeah.
So you keep your pronouns. You keep saying he. That's a she.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, normally in our palace, when you say he or she, we said, okay, they are ladies in skirts. But for the purpose of this now, let me use the word she. Well, one of the things she needs to, but oftentimes, if you notice my lords, they prefer to be called he, my lord, not my lady. So please, if I use them interchangeably, I think it's correct in our legal palace. So like most of the reform people are craving for is not something my lord can do on his own sitting in the bench. You see, the court you see is a court made up of the Constitution. And whatever thing the Constitution says about the court, that is what the court acts upon. Whatever procedures they put in place is in line with the Constitution. So most of the reform they are craving for, my lord can only achieve more on if he can meet with the stakeholders and see that some of the areas of the Constitution need to be amended. If you notice it, during the COVID-19, there was an issue as to hearing proceedings virtually, if not for the amendment of the Constitution, because it went as far going to the alteration of the practice direction and all those stuff. Yeah, that is for that. But there are some sensitive areas which has become a clog in the wheel of justice that can only be amended, that can only give the reform if the Constitution is amended. A good example, if you look at cases coming from the lower court down to the Supreme Court, which embodied the Supreme Court, you see, that is not issue my lord or she can address on his own. This is issue of constitution that boils down to fair hearing, that boils down to the procedures of hierarchy as to court. It's there for the constitution to itemize issues that ought to exceed the High Court down to the Court of Appeal, from the Court of Appeal to the Supreme Court. So you see, it's beyond my Lord's power, but rather my Lord can meet with the stakeholders and also parley with the stakeholders to see that this reform cut across board. It's political. It has political solution, because political solution it needs to meet with the other heads of government, other arms of government.
Right.
And you also need the political will or the judicial will for such thing to be implemented when the political will is assurance has been gotten. Speaking
of judicial will and political will, one of the things that is very, that has been spoken about oftentimes, whether it's the general populace or even, at the judicial public affairs analysts, is about accountability and transparency with the judiciary, and a conversation about whether or not the judiciary is being state captured. How do you see the new justice of Nigeria being able to ensure transparency and accountability within the judiciary, and they can have autonomy, so that it's not state captured? How do you think that the justice or her lordship is able to do this during this time with her new appointment?
Okay, the autonomy has been granted to federal high courts. I can recall that during the time of President Muhammadu Buhari, the autonomy has been granted to all federal high courts, including the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, and the Federal High Court, the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory. Autonomy has been granted to them. Just like I said, it now boils down to the judicial will. Then let me correct one impression. Oftentimes, most of these cases that goes to public criticism and public domain for debate, sometimes people who criticize or who discuss these cases of transparency and accountability, they don't have the privilege of looking at the processes. Because just like I told, the judiciary is like garbage in, garbage out. They are blind to the society. That is one. Then two, we should also look at, there is a justice who raised a complaint, a retired justice of the Supreme Court, who raised a complaint that outside the justices we see that sit as the masquerade, there are people who place the drums for them. How do we look at the employment cadre outside the justices, the employment cadre of non-judicial officers? How do we checkmate them? These are people who belong to several groups. Like I can recall that most of the registrars of the court, some of them are legal practitioners that belongs to the Nigerian Bar Association, which has the privileges of petitioning them or asking any disciplinary committee to look into their conduct or reporting them to the National Judicial Council. So the best thing my Lord can do is one, make sure that the transparency of processes, because when judgments are given, let people have the access to the record filed by lawyers, because some of them are caused by professional negligence, and the court has nothing else to do than to what goes on the other side of the law. That is one. Then two, any hairy judicial officers should be sanctioned appropriately. We could see how some of the judicial officers have thrown what we call the professional decorum or the judicial decorum into the floor. So in such circumstances, it's not only coming to the media, petition them. I think they have about 23 judicial officers who are undergoing investigation, and those investigations and the outcome of the investigation should be made public. But be that as it may, the society has a role to play, lawyers has a role to play, and him who has taken this responsibility in this critical time when the trust of the masses of the judiciary is dwindling, has a lot to play. It needs to start from its own ranking, which is who are those that have questionable character in the judicial service. Well, they need to be played out.
I mean, from your submission, there's very clear that it's a wrong road to reform, and also there's a part of education, re-education that has to happen with the populace as well. By populace, I mean the citizenry. But hey, To, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming on.